Hi everyone, and welcome to Women's Health Grampians Annual General Meeting. My name is Amy Rhodes and I'm the Chair of the Women's Health Grampians Board. I'd like to formally welcome our board, our staff, Women's Health Grampians members, senior representatives from our collaborative partner agencies as well. We do have some apologies today, which I won't go through now, but they will be included in the minutes on our website alongside the annual report. I will mention one apology though from one of our board members in Di Thompson. Today's AGM, first up, we'll have the formal part of the meeting, followed by our guest speaker, Libby Lyons, who is the Director of Workplace Gender Equality Agency, and she will engage with in a conversation with our board member, Jessica Grimble. She's keen to get questions from you also. We'll then hear from our Women's Health Grampians Equality for All advocates, Jenny Beals and Kathy Masharia. If you have any questions at all during the meeting, you can enter them into the chat function at the bottom of your screen and we'll get to as many of them as possible. You're also welcome to use the chat for any contributions you may have during the meeting. I'd also like to advise all those attending that today's meeting will be, during today's meeting, we will be taking screenshots for use in social media and that the meeting is being recorded and will be made available on our website in the next few days. Please let us know if this is of concern to you. It's now my pleasure to do an acknowledgement of country. This year our AGM would have been held in Horsham and our friend Jo Clark was to welcome us to her country, but unfortunately has been unable to join us today. I will instead acknowledge the traditional owners, including Jo, of the lands that we are all on as we have our meeting today. This includes, for Women's Health Grampians, the lands of the Jadwa, Jadwajali, Wagaya, Jabagulk, Wadawurrung, Dja-dja-wurrung, Wurundjeri and Wotjobaluk people. I'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. I also acknowledge the immense grieving of the Dja-wurrung people over the destruction of the directions tree on Dja-wurrung land recently, and the treatment of those who have sought to preserve this important cultural heritage. We recognise that fundamental significance of cultural traditions, beliefs and connection to country for the health and well-being of Aboriginal people and acknowledge the significance of the birthing trees for Dja-wurrung women. We recognise the impact of colonisation on this country and the people that own and love it and have been here for thousands of years before us. The image you are seeing now is the artwork prepared for the Daltja, the Aboriginal-led partnership working to ensure that Aboriginal families and communities are living free from family violence. The artist of this beautiful image is Trina Dalton-Ujes, a proud Wadawurrung woman. We'll now move into formal business, and I start with the confirmation of the minutes of the 2019 AGM. I would now like to confirm the minutes of the 2019 AGM, which have been provided to members prior to this meeting. Can I please call on a member who was present at last year's meeting to move that the minutes are received? Thank you, Jazz. And can I have someone to second this, please? Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. We'll now move on to the presentation of the annual report as my cat jumps up onto my lap. I was waiting for that to happen, so I'll just put her back on the floor. My dog is at daycare today and the cat knows that Wednesdays are her day because the dog is at daycare. So yeah, she's back again. Okay, great. So that's remote working for all of us. This year, Women's Health Grampians has gone digital with our annual report. You can view it at your leisure on our website and we'll share some highlights later in the meeting. I have a few reflections from the past year that I would like to share now on behalf of the board. As a board, we are proud of the way that Women's Health Grampians has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. Business as usual continued with a swift shift to online platforms, allowing us to reach our communities on many key topics. The ability to not just remain relevant, but actually increase our impact during these times is outstanding. The hard work of our staff and of our CEO, Marianne, is recognised by the board. We are incredibly proud of them. We are also proud of how hard our board continues to work to achieve balance in board membership with consideration to cultural diversity, rural and regional locations, age and professional backgrounds, particularly over the past year. The board continues to strive for stronger and more accountable governance. And over the last year, we've strengthened processes such as our CEO appraisal, board KPIs, meeting agendas and policy review schedule, and have completed several major pieces of work, including a revised constitution and a strategic plan review. I would now like to ask Julianne Zajac, or Jazz, as Treasurer of the board, to present the financial report. Jazz.
Thank you, Amy. Pardon me. I have pleasure in presenting the financial report for Women's Health Grampians Incorporated for the year ending 30th of June 2020. A copy of the full financial report is now available on our website. This year, PPT Audit Pty Limited of 20 Lydiard Street South in Ballarat conducted the audit of the financial accounts. During the year ended 30th of June, Women's Health Grampians derived total revenue of $1,328,513 compared to $1,557,526 in the 2019 year. This included investment income of $19,777 compared to $2,114 in the 2019 year. You can see our various revenue sources in this slide that's appearing at this point, which highlights the bulk of our funding coming from government. The total, excuse me, the total expenditure in this financial year was $1,369,352, which included depreciation of capital assets to the value of $46,081. Our next slide actually indicates our key areas of expenditure. After allowing for all of the above items of income and expenditure, Women's Health Grampians had a net operating deficit for the financial year of $40,839. This net deficit reflects the first year of adoption of the Australian Accounting Standard Board's AASB 15 and AASB 1058, all the standards under the sun to do with accounting, which changes the way we account for funding received across financial years that's yet to be expended. In late 2019, in order to strengthen Women's Health Grampians' capacity to meet our strategic vision, the board developed a diversified investment strategy to invest the funds generated from the sale of the freehold building in Drummond Street into the Australian stock market. While the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted on the investment portfolio balance, resulting in some decline, it has seen some positive recovery. The investment strategy decision was always considered to be a long-term objective, and the board is confident the current strategy is solid. This year has been an extraordinary year for Women's Health Grampians, as it has been for the majority of organisations. However, we are pleased with our outcomes given the circumstances. In my opinion, this is a result of good, prudent financial management by both the Board of Management and staff, and the financial position of Women's Health Grampians is considered stable as at the 30th of June 2020. As the balance sheet on the slide that should be appearing momentarily. There we go. As this slide illustrates, and the board looks forward to the coming year where we can focus on recovery and strengthen our role in addressing gender inequality and improving women's health. On that note, I'd like to move that this report be accepted. So do we have someone that can accept or second the report? Thanks. We get Jenny and Jess. Okay. I think it's back to you now, Amy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jazz. We'll now move on to general business, for which 14 days notice has been given. I would like to advise that no items of general business have been received. I will now hand over to our CEO and Board Secretary, Marianne Hendren, for the appointment of board members. Thanks, Marianne.
Thank you, Amy, and good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to have you join us for this AGM. Our board term is 2 years renewable, and we have 3 members whose terms have expired, and they have re-nominated for the period 2020 to 2022. So one of those is Amy Rhodes, who you have already met, our chair, and Amy has re-nominated for a 3rd term. Thank you, Amy. Also, Rachel Whitaker has re-nominated for a 3rd term. Thank you, Rachel. I believe these people should be appearing on your screen as I speak, but anyway, fingers crossed that's happening. And the 3rd person who's re-nominating is Shani Kane, who's re-nominating for a 2nd term. Thank you, Shani. Also, Jessica Grimble was co-opted onto the board to fill a vacancy in August. Jessica has formally nominated now for the next 2 years. Thank you, Jessica. So I want to acknowledge those 4 wonderful board members and thank them for nominating and re-nominating. There being the same number of nominations as vacancies, no election is required this year. So I'd like to declare the appointments of Amy Rhodes, Rachel Whitaker, Shani Kane and Jessica Grimble. Welcome to the board.
Thank you, Marianne. And I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome our re-nominating members, but also to welcome the remainder of our board who will be joining us. Frances Salenga, Di Thompson, Julianne Zajac or Jazz, Shauna Dominelli and Jenny Courtney. I'm shortly going to hand back to Marianne for her report. I understand that I need to give a few moments here to allow for some video work in the background to be organised. So hopefully I've given Deb, our wonderful operator, enough time, and I'll hand back to Marianne. Thank you.
Of course, the classic vote before I put the microphone on. Thank you, Amy. And thanks to all the board, to whom I am so grateful for your support, particularly in this year. I have always felt throughout that you have my back and our backs as staff members, and that's just meant an enormous amount. In this most unusual of years, it's hard to write a report that's not completely overshadowed by the context of COVID-19. However, we were actually managing the COVID reality for only 4 out of the 12 months of this financial year, which is kind of hard to believe. But when we reflect back, we can see that a substantial body of achievements took place prior to lockdown, as well as what happened afterwards when we adapted to what we called business as unusual. Now, this is where we have a little bit of a technical challenge, which I'm sure we're able for. I am now going to introduce a short video showcasing our annual report for 2019-20, and hopefully that will Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well done to our backup crew who've pulled that off beautifully. It was, you know, no easy feat to to work out the logistics of this, and I really acknowledge the work that's gone into it from the staff. You will be able to view that at your leisure on our YouTube channel, and I believe a link will go into the chat if it's not already there, with the link to that video, and you can also view the full annual report and the finance reports on our website. So now at this point, I would like to invite the wonderful Women's Health Grampians staff to put their cameras on so that we can see them and personalize this remote AGM a little bit more. It is, you know, difficult to relate to people in this remote way of working, but we thought we'd have everybody appear on screen, and that's just happening as I speak. So hopefully everyone's appearing before your eyes. So yes, it has been a huge year and everyone has pulled together so well, and I think, you know, has achieved an enormous amount, as you'll be able to read more about. So well done. And it's great to see some comments coming through about the video and the annual report. So thank you. We really appreciate getting that feedback. I would also like to acknowledge some staff who have moved on during this year. It seems like longer ago, but it was actually at the start of 2019-20, we farewelled Cherie Pilkington, who would be known to many of you as the driver of a lot of our work with migrant and refugee women over 3 years. And happily, Cherie is still very much in our orbit, just down the road at the Barclay Street Hub, working with the Council for Multicultural Youth. Her final project with us was Unstoppable Women, and she has left a tremendous legacy in terms of this work. So thank you, Cherie, and stand by for an announcement early in 2021 from the Ballarat Zonta Club's Ballarat Great Women Initiative, which was done in partnership with Women's Health Grampians. So I believe there's maybe an announcement coming up there, which is very exciting. I also want to acknowledge Christy Knappman, who provided support to CHIFIC, the Central Highlands Integrated Family Violence Committee, prior to going on maternity leave in 2018, and then on her return to work last year was instrumental in commencing the updating of our constitution to what it is today. Thank you, Christy, and I'm very excited that immediately after this AGM, we're going into a special AGM, which will hopefully endorse that constitution. We're really proud of it, and it was a lot of work and a lot of thought and consideration went into that. The final person I want to acknowledge is our wonderful long-standing finance officer, Pat Locknan, who worked with Women's Health Grampians for 17 years. Some of you may have attended Pat's Zoom farewell gathering back in May, I believe that was. Pat was known for her hard-working, her great work ethic and her patience, and you know, was very much the glue of the organisation. And we really, we've missed Pat a lot, but in some ways, it was a bit of a blessing that her departure took place during lockdown, because it sort of helped to create that bit of separation that I think would have been perhaps more marked had we not been in lockdown. So yeah, Pat's gone on to enjoy a well-deserved retirement, and thank you, Pat. We will have some virtual flower presentations coming up later, and obviously, we've already acknowledged through gifts the departure of these wonderful staff members. Now, I think as I've been speaking that the staff group has actually all turned up on the screen, or pretty much I've noticed some people coming up as I've been speaking. So hopefully you're getting to see some of the faces of the wonderful people who contribute to everything that we do. And thank you all. So now I'd like to, I think we might be running slightly ahead of schedule, and I'd like to declare that the formal section of the meeting has been completed, as in the presentation of all those reports and the annual staff report. So can I just check with someone in the control centre that Libby Lyons has actually joined us already? Okay, no problem. Thank you. The glitches of the joys and glitches of of doing this. So what I'd like to do is just quickly run through some of the comments that have come through, which are very congratulatory around our annual report, and we're very thrilled that you like it, because it was a trial for us to do it this way, and also to organise the video, which was a bit of an add-on to that, to make it, I suppose, come to life for you in this meeting. So if anybody wants any tips on how to do it, I'm sure that some of our staff who are behind the scenes would be happy to share some of that knowledge. It was a very interesting experience to do it that way. So I do believe that we may have Libby just joining us now, and I will move to introduce you to our board member, Jessica Grimble, who you've already seen on your screens. And Jess is based in Horsham, and as I said earlier, joined the board earlier this year. And among many other roles and attributes, Jessica manages the leadership program for the Wimmera region and is based at the Wimmera Development Association. So we felt she was really well placed to facilitate this session with Libby, also because, you know, notionally and virtually this meeting is happening in Horsham. So we really wanted to kind of keep that basis of the Horsham end of the Wimmera end of the region coming through this meeting. So I'll hand over now to Jessica, and thank you all.
Thank you very much, Marianne. It's my privilege to introduce our guest speaker today. Libby Lyons was appointed Director of the Workplace Gender Equality Agency in October 2015. She oversees the statutory reporting process that gathers gender equality data from more than 10,000 employers, covering more than 4 million employees. Libby was listed in Apolitical's 100 Most Influential People Working in Gender Policy for both 2018 and 2019, and was featured in 200 Women Who Will Change the Way You See the World. She is a member of Chief Executive Women and is a proud ambassador for Honour a Woman, a volunteer organisation working to achieve gender balance in the Australian honours system. Welcome, Libby. We very much appreciate you joining us from Sydney today. I encourage those on the call to submit your questions via the chat functionality as Libby speaks to us today. Libby, welcome to you. We're keen to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on the gender pay gap and gender equality more generally, but to start off, you've clearly had a very interesting journey to reach the position you're in now. Can you share with us a little bit of that journey today? Just having a bit of trouble with your sound there, Libby. Might do while Libby is working through her technology issues. We're going to go, Libby, we'll press pause on your presentation if that's okay. And I'd like to introduce, while we walk through that issue, our Equality for All advocates, Jenny Beals and Kathy Masharia. The Equality for All project seeks to raise awareness of diversity and empower local women to lead change within their communities. Women's Health Grampians has recruited 11 women from a range of diverse backgrounds to be equality advocates. Equality advocates have received training to enable them to present on their lived experiences and support core members to develop a deeper understanding. As I was mentioning, equality advocates have received training to enable them to present on their lived experiences and support core members to develop a deeper understanding of effective strategies to reduce discrimination and the barriers to equality. Equality advocates are able to speak at core organisations, events and workshops. Equality advocates will also be able to meet one-on-one with core members to talk about equality for all, diversity and inclusion for all women. Our first speaker, Cherie Pilkington, has lived to see the role of women change, often for the better, over many years. But he's also saddened that too many women are still traumatised by violence and often have very few options, in particular for older women. Our second speaker, Cathy Masharia, wants to be an active advocate on issues around inequality by promoting equity.
Okay.
And Cathy will be speaking to us on their lived experiences during COVID-19 and how they're looking forward to a gender equal recovery. I'd like to hand over now to Cherie Pilkington, please.
So lockdown has certainly been an interesting time for me as an older woman. We have a son who lives in Colombia who came to Australia in March to be best man at his best mate's wedding, and of course then couldn't return. So I've found myself in the last, and he has finally gone back to his girlfriend in Colombia about 3 weeks ago. But I found myself very much becoming mother again, it's a long time since I've just been a mother, because he was working all hours of the day and night and on American hours, trying to keep the business he works in afloat, very stressed, very anxious about what was happening with his girlfriend. And so I took on that traditional role. And it was interesting because I haven't been a hands-on mother for quite a few years. You know, my kids are adults. And I personally found that quite challenging. You know, I couldn't get out, I couldn't go and see my friends, and I had to become the keeping everybody calm in the household. As well, I had been working in Melbourne earlier in the year, part-time, and I lost my job because I was the last one on and they didn't have any consulting work. There wasn't enough admin work for me, and so I lost a job. I did pick up some work with our local paper, and then again they put a younger staff member on and said, look, maybe it's time for you to retire. So it's, you know, I'm fortunate. I have a supportive partner, but it has been tough on my own mental health. Yeah, so that's me.
Thank you, Cherie. We're now going to hand over to Cathy, please.
Thank you, Jessica. Can you hear me? Yeah. I would say, like Jenny said, it wasn't easy in the beginning when we went on to lockdown, especially with homeschooling for me, because I've got young ones in school. And that was very challenging because I didn't know how to navigate technology. And now here they are. And I was also a student at that point. So I had to learn how to use this technology for my own and also to be able to support my daughter. The hardest part was that my elder daughter, who was working in Melbourne at the time, lost her job. She's a beauty therapist. And I think they were sort of the first people to be closed down. So she was living in Melbourne, but now she had to come back home and start living with us with no income. She has been working as a casual worker, so she didn't qualify for JobKeeper payment, which also happened to be my case. I've been working 2 jobs as a casual worker for close to 1 year by that time, but still I didn't qualify for that. So it was quite tough financially to keep things afloat with 3 kids, no income, homeschooling. At some point, we couldn't even afford internet. I think sometime back we had this such a meeting and I was on and off. I couldn't attend for, I think, 4 sessions because I couldn't afford the internet, and that was really, really frustrating. So I think it has been tough on all of us, and yes, it has had mental and psychological impact on all of us. I watched my daughter go down to depression because she's outgoing and now she couldn't go anywhere. But thankfully, she's now back to job and she's doing well. Things are looking good. She's now back to Melbourne and she's happy. So yeah, it's been a challenge, but somehow we overcame it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy and Jenny. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. I'm going to take a couple of moments to take a few questions from those on the call to Jenny and Kathy. And Kathy, I'd like to start with you. I've got a question for you. What would you like to see change as we recover from COVID-19?
I think the first thing would be a consideration for who qualifies for what, because I think it was very unfair that someone who's been working diligently for close to 1 year couldn't qualify for JobKeeper payment. And for me, that was really sad because like my daughter and myself, we didn't have that income. And so it was really hard for me. So I would say some flexibility with the system to accommodate people who have been working. Yeah.
Jenny, I'd like to put the same question to you, if I may. What would you like to see change as we recover from COVID-19?
I think, well, government, state and federal needs to make sure that they're continuing some of the JobKeeper subsidies, because a lot of people, if they start cutting that before long, that will mainly impact women. Because, you know, women generally earn less than men, and there's quite a lot of focus on subsidising people, what you'd call traditionally male enterprises. And I think women often get left behind in those circumstances, and also then have to bear the burden of caring for children as well. So I'm hoping governments can continue to inject funding to support families at this time.
Thank you, Jenny. That leads me to my second question for you, please. Do you think that your gender played a part in reverting to traditional roles during the lockdown?
Yes. And I didn't really resent it because as a mother, I knew how important it was to try and keep stability in the family and to keep people calm. But I did find at times that I needed support and I wasn't able to get that from anyone. So, I'm fortunate because we live on enough land, we can go for walks in the country. And I enjoy patchwork. Everyone laughs at me, but I found that creative time was important for me. And I made sure I did something creative as often as I could.
It's very mindful too, isn't it? It's a great process to work through. So thank you very much. I'm going to stick with you. I've got another question. What should employers keep in mind, do you think, as we recover from COVID? Will the government incentives to employ younger people affect older people, do you think?
Well, I hope they don't impact older people because, there's a lot of older people who still need to work. Sorry, just give me the question again. Sorry, I'm having a seniors moment here.
What should employers keep in mind as we recover from COVID? Will the government incentives to employ younger people affect older employees? Look,
they're probably bound to. I think it's really important that we get as many young people into work as possible. And I guess that's possibly one of the consequences for older people is, you suddenly seem to be too old to work and so bad luck, off you go. I would hope not, because there's plenty of particularly older women who don't have a lot of superannuation, who then have to fall back on, a modest pension. And so, you would like to think that employers don't just focus on young people. Says me, who's an old person. Yeah.
Thank you, Jenny. Thanks for the response there. And I'd like to go to Kathy first, and then we'll go back to Jenny. What positives, if any, have you been able to take from the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, I have. I must say, I'll first answer part of the question that you asked before, how I would like to see it done as we recover from this. And I think, as Jenny said, I think it's important that the government don't cut the COVID subsidy off. Some people are getting 500, they cut it down to 250, and now they're scraping it off. Well, we haven't got our jobs back. So if they can consider keeping that money on, at least until people get job or based on individual circumstances, that would be great. Yeah, answering your second question now, I have learned a lot. I had no idea what Zoom was before this, and I couldn't do much online except type my stuff on Word, but I have learned quite a lot. So it's been a plus on my side because I have enlightened myself. I have had time to attend many Zoom workshops and things like that I couldn't have attended before. So that's a plus for me. And I was also amazed at how I was able to keep my family together as a single mom, having to contain everyone from just getting off the grid with the COVID issues. So it's been a positive for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. You're a superwoman. And Jenny, how about yourself? Have you been able to take some positives from the COVID period?
Yes, I have. In the last 8 weeks, I've decided I needed to get fitter and healthier because I've got to have some surgery on a growth on my stomach, which is very exciting. And I thought, no, this is it. I'm 67. If I don't start looking after my health, I might not have it. So I've been walking a lot every morning and making my old husband come out with me as well. And I've lost about 8 kilos of weight, and I'm feeling really, really good. And that's been the positive, I think, in the last couple of months.
Thank you again, Jenny and Kathy, for coming along today and sharing your story. I'd now like to go back to our guest speaker, Libby Lyons, and fingers crossed for some success with technology.
Okay, can you hear me?
Hi, Libby. Welcome to you. Thank you for joining us today. Wonderful to have you along. I won't reintroduce you, but it's just wonderful to have you here. And I would like to start off this section of our meeting with you perhaps taking some time to just share a little bit about your journey of how you've come to be where you are today.
Well, as I said before, thank you. It's a treat to be here, and I particularly like to engage with people in the rural and regional areas of Australia, because so much of the focus we often see from a government perspective is on cities, but really, there are so many employees and issues that we need to address in rural and regional Australia. So thank you firstly for inviting me. It's great. I started my life as a primary school teacher, and very female dominated industry. And I would have to say that it was as a primary school teacher where we had, the bulk of the staff. I would have thought that at least 85% of the staff at that time were women. And beyond the importance of having those male voices at the table. And
have we still got you, Libby? We've just dropped out, I think, at your end. Have we got someone in the control room that can check in for us there?
She dropped out. She's totally dropped off.
She's moving now. We'll try again. Welcome back, Libby. You're on mute.
You froze on me. Were you able to see and hear me still? Because you dropped out altogether.
You dropped out.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know what's happening. There are gremlins in the government system today. That's obvious. So anyway, so I learned early on the importance of having the male voice at the table. From there, I moved into the IT industry. And in those days, it wasn't so much a male-dominated industry. That tells you how old I am. It was fairly evenly balanced between women and men. And yet we've now gone to a 360 where it is a male-dominated industry now. That bothers me, because we are having artificial intelligence, we are having systems and applications and hardware designed by men, and yet half the users are women. How many of you, I had to get a new iPhone the other day, and I said, I want the smallest one you've got. And he said, well, this is the smallest. I said, it's the same size as my other one. It's designed for a man's hand. And he said, oh, I'd never thought of that. But of course they are. So all these things impact on us on a daily basis. And I think that it, you know, as I've worked through my career and I've witnessed some of these things, I've thought about the impact that both working in female and male dominated industries can have on us as people and as employees. Before taking on this job, I worked in the male-dominated industry of resources. And let me tell you, that is a very, very blokey industry. And with that blokey industry, I learnt very quickly that the sorts of things that, I learned tactics to have my voice heard around a table of men. And I think that that was an important step for me, because for me, and you will all have experienced it, you are spoken over. You will say something and it is repeated back to you by a man. You are mansplained. They tell you how it is. And I think that the one thing that I learned, and the one thing that I used to get my voice heard, was humour. And I felt that if I could start by having a bit of a joke, usually at myself, be a little bit self-deprecating, funnily enough, that worked, and they would stop and listen. So from that very male-dominated industry, I then learnt a lot about me. I learnt a lot about them. I learnt a lot about the industry. And from there, I took on the role as head of the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. I've been here 5 years. I've got another 6 months to run. I finish up in April next year. And I think if somebody was to ask me my greatest achievement in this role, I think it would be bringing the data that we collect out to as many people as possible. In Australia, we're very good in Australia at knocking ourselves and telling each other what we don't do well. But there's one thing we do extraordinarily well in Australia, and we are leading the world in this regard, and that is in collecting the data around what is happening in terms of gender equality in the private sector. There is no other country in the world collecting the depth and breadth of data that we are around gender. And that information is so important, because it helps guide policy. It gives us a very real picture of what is happening. It provides us with now a longitudinal data set from which we can analyse and find hard evidence as to the strategies and actions that work to drive better gender outcomes in Australian workplaces. So, as I leave this job in April next year, I think that would be my one great achievement.
Thank you so much, Libby. That's just wonderful to start off there. I'd like to ask you, how do you feel we can best communicate that data and those statistics to people who perhaps might need, let me say, a little bit more convincing? And my second question is, oh, sorry, I've just lost it. How important have you found it to balance using the stats and stories when translating evidence in different contexts?
I think the data is terribly important because it does tell a story and it does give a picture. And as I said before, we've now got this longitudinal data set, and we have partnered for the last 5 years with Bankwest Curtin Economic Centre, and they have taken our data set and gone in and done some really deep analysis as to how women are faring, particularly in senior roles in Australia. And in May, we released our 5th report, and that 5th report showed for the first time, and I think, and again, we have searched the world, we believe that this is a world first in using a longitudinal data set to find a strong and convincing causal link between the increase of women in leadership and improved company performance, productivity, and profitability. Now, there's been lots of work done out there around the business case for gender equality, and it's been based on some survey data and looking at organisations in the public and private sector. But this is the first time using a longitudinal data set that covers more than 4.3 million employees that found this causal link. And basically, one of the things that it showed was that if you have an increase of 10 percentage points or more in female key management personnel, and they're usually the ones that report into a CEO, that will lead to, on average, a 6.6% increase in the market value of the average ASX listed company. Now that equates to, on average, $104.7 million for the average ASX company. Now, you know, if I was a member of a board at the moment, or I was CEO or an executive of a leading Australian company in the private sector now, and I didn't heed that advice, I didn't heed that hard evidence, I don't think I'd be meeting my fiduciary duties as a board member and a leader. The evidence is there, the relationship, the causal relationship is there, and it's clear. We've just got to now get to and do it. So that's the strength and the beauty of collecting this data and being able to use it to, you know, do some really sensible and deep analysis and dig deep down into the numbers to find out what is actually going on. That was the second part. What was the first part of your question?
How do we best communicate this data to people who might need a little bit more convincing? I feel like you've probably answered the question within your answer.
I think so. Look, I think the issue though is actually getting the message across. And I think one thing that I have learned is that organisations, employers, men in particular, like data and they like a story. And if you can give them the data and the story, they'll listen. For me, the big issue is how do we get that story and that information and data out to the broader community, out to the employees who are running and caring in our aged care homes, who are doing the maintenance work in our local primary school. Because understanding why gender equality is important is actually an economics issue. And if we can tell that story through the data to people, to the average person in the street, so that they understand, so that they can then start talking to their employers about what they might be doing to improve gender equality outcomes, then we start getting more action, we start driving more change. And at the end of the day, the people that will really benefit are the families of those people where the women and men are starting to get a better go. So for me, that's the really hard nut to crack. How do I get this information out to ordinary people who are, you know, doing the most important jobs in our community?
Thanks, Libby. I'd like to talk a little bit about women taking on leadership positions now, and would like to ask your lessons or advice to women coming through the ranks who might be looking to take on leadership positions. What would you say to them?
Be persistent, be patient. Look, the data tells the story. just 17.1% of CEOs in our data set today are women. That's pathetic. Really and truly, that says that 83% of the men, 83% of the CEOs are men. What I can tell you though, again, from the data is if we look at managers overall, we're actually doing quite well in Australia. There's no problem with the pipeline, as I said, because at the moment in Australia, 39.3% of all managers in our data set are women. Now that's pretty good. We're nearly at that 40% mark. 43%, just over 43% of promotions into management last year went to women. Now, if that trend continues, we know that by 2030, we will have gender balance at most management levels in Australian workplaces. So that's fantastic. That's just 10 years away. The problem comes when we get to CEO level, and it seems that we get to a point and then we fall off a cliff. We don't hit the glass ceiling. I think we fall off a cliff. And why are we falling off that cliff? And I think some of it is to do around the way we recruit and who we are recruiting and who is doing the recruiting. So a lot of times the recruiting for those very senior roles are being done by men and men only. And particularly in times of economic turbulence, when you are recruiting, you want to recruit someone who's going to challenge you less or the least. And generally the person who's going to challenge you least is somebody who is educated like you, who looks like you, who sounds like you, and that's usually a middle-aged white man. So I think that's a problem. I think the second thing is there's lack of transparency around recruitment at those levels. Too often people are just tapped on the shoulder, the jobs aren't advertised, they haven't got a gender balance board, they haven't got a recruitment board, they haven't got diversity on their recruitment board. And I think the other problem that we've got is about the culture we have around being a CEO, that we have a view that in order to run an organisation that you have to work all hours under the sun. Now, what I can tell you is that women dominate in casual and part-time roles in Australia. In fact, women work part-time at 3 times the rate of men, 3 times the rate of men. I can also tell you from our data set that just 6% of managers in Australia are part-time. So that tells you if you want to be a manager and you want to work part-time, forget it. It's not going to happen. So we need to change the way we think, we need to change the way we work, and we need to start embracing flexible work other than just working from home, but in terms of compressed working weeks, job sharing. For the first time in Australia, we are now actually starting to see senior managers job share. There's the EJA, which is the Environmental Justice Association. They've got CEOs, 2 CEOs that are job sharing. So we're starting to see that happen. We just need to see more of it. So we have to challenge what we see, that is the poor behaviour, and encourage the good behaviour.
Thanks, Libby. That leads me to my next question. What do you see are the opportunities that might come from our COVID period in terms of workplaces?
Well, I think the great thing that's happened as a result of the COVID pandemic is that many people had to work remotely or work from home. And the surprising thing for employers is that, hey, guess what? Their employees were still productive. And in fact, in lots of cases, productivity has improved, has increased. So that's been the great news that we've seen. Unfortunately, though, now, what I am seeing and hearing is that flexible work has become synonymous with working from home. And as I mentioned to you before, there are many other ways of working flexibly. And we have to ensure that employers have put a policy in place that embraces all forms of flexible work, not just working from home. I think the other thing that we must be very careful of, there have been some surveys done over the last couple of months that have suggested that men can't wait to get back into the office. Whereas women have found that working from home has allowed them to meet the juggle of everyday life so much easier, that they've been able to work in a way that suits the other obligations that they have with their families and their communities. What we need to watch, and what employers must watch, is that as we start returning to a COVID-safe environment, and as we start moving back to, will we ever get back to the normal we were before? I don't know. But as we start moving into a new normal, we must make sure that we are not sidelining the women who aren't in the office as much as the men, that we need to ensure that they do not miss out on the career opportunities, on the promotions, on the pay increases, and all of those things that are easier to give if somebody is there and is visible in the office and having those incidental conversations. That's my big worry as we move into our new normal.
Certainly, thank you. Women have been, there's a lot of studies that are talking about the impacts of women through COVID, women being described as shock absorbers of COVID-19 due to the specific and disproportionate social and economic impacts they're experiencing. Would you comment on this, please?
Look, women have most certainly, I think, borne the brunt up until now of the COVID pandemic. We've had sort of the quadruple whammy. Women were at the front line in fighting the pandemic. As well as that, they were having to juggle homeschooling, caring for others in the family and community, and also wearing that extra worry. You know, as women, we worry. We tend to worry more than men. In fact, I have a gorgeous husband who keeps telling me that I have to close my worry box, that my worry box is open all the time and open a lot more than his. And I think that that's absolutely right. We do worry. We worry about the fact that the children weren't at school and what is that going to do to their educational development. We worry that if we're in the front line and we're cleaning at the hospital, are we going to bring the virus home to our family? We worry. We worry that our husband may have been stood down, or our partner may have been stood down. How are we going to get the money to put the food on the table? We're worriers. So we've had to bear the brunt of so much going on here. Initially too, the stats showed us that women were losing their jobs at a greater rate than men. And I heard, I think it was Jenny earlier who said that, you know, throughout this whole pandemic, on top of everything else, she lost her job. You know, employers do that. They go to the low-hanging fruit first when they have to lay people off. And the low-hanging fruit are those that came on last or who work casually or part-time. And so many of those people are women. So women have borne the brunt of this as well. Through a traditional recession, we see that men actually lose their jobs quicker, but they also pick them up quicker into the recovery, because most recoveries in Australia favour male-dominated industries. So I think we've done it tough. I think we're going to continue to do it tough, but I think it is incumbent on all of us to keep calling this out, to keep reminding everybody that we are half the population, that we have been at the front line. We've been holding up the health service. We've been holding up the aged care sector. We've been holding up those sectors that have been at the front line, and that we deserve and need the exact same opportunity as men to re-engage in the workforce as we move into an economic recovery. So keep the spotlight on gender equality. That's really important.
Thank you. We've got a very timely question that's come through from Jenny as you've been talking and closing out on the masculine element there. What are your thoughts on how to shift the way certain industries have hierarchical or masculine leadership styles to become open to collaborative or consultative structures that women excel in?
I think the first thing, and this is something that I talk to employers about all the time, I think particularly in a lot of male-dominated workplaces, they focus on things like presenteeism and the number of hours somebody sits at a desk or the way they engage in the workplace. I think, and I think some organisations are starting to see this as a result of the pandemic, but you know, the thing that we need to focus on as employers, and the thing that we can start talking about quite openly to move change, is we need to focus on outcomes. You know, I'm employed to do a job. What are the outcomes that the minister expects of me in this job? And if my outcomes are very clear, it shouldn't matter where I am physically to do that job, of course, except of course if I need to be somewhere to dial into your meeting or whatever. But the hours in which I do that, or how I do that, as long as I'm doing it in a law-abiding, ethical manner, how I do that shouldn't worry. So this shouldn't matter. So this business about having to be present in an office and be seen in an office for ridiculous hours every day, I think we have to start trying to move that. We have to move it to more of an outcomes-based workplace. I think the other thing that we need to do is we need to change this culture, and it's going to be very hard, of the men being the breadwinner and the women being the homemakers. Now that's going to be hard because that is so entrenched in the way we think, in the way we speak, in the way we bring up our children, in almost everything that we do. Some of the ways that we can do this are by, as we move back into the new normal in a workplace, encourage men to formally take up flexible work arrangements so that they are working from home a day or two a week or whatever that might be. And also to encourage men to take parental leave. And I think one thing we need to do too is try and change these labels that we use around parents as being primary and secondary carers. I mean, this is nonsense. We are all parents. We all have an obligation and responsibility to bring our children up and to do it to the best of our ability. To all of a sudden call someone a primary or secondary carer is silly, and it's immediately driving a wedge between the two parents in a family. So that's another thing that I think that we need to do, is focus on these things that recognise that we have responsibilities outside the workplace, and through parental leave and flexible work, and also look at how we are, what we are expecting from our employees in terms of the jobs that they do and how they do it. And I think we've lost Jessica.
I'm back. I apologise for that. I had a battery issue of my own, so I'm back. Apologies, Libby. I missed some of that, but I will be sure to review that when I can watch the recording. I've got two final questions that I'd like to put to you, Libby, and one is with regards to the Gender Equality Act. How do you see Victoria's Gender Equality Commission and the implementation of the Act playing out? And do you think that that will give us an advantage in narrowing the pay gap?
The thing that narrows a pay gap is taking action. So, you know, if you take action, look, I think the approach we took in Australia as a whole was that in order to address the gender pay gap, we had to address the other issues, the other gender equality issues in our workplaces. And so we took a more holistic approach rather than just focusing on the gender pay gap. And that proved to be very wise. So looking at, you know, the sorts of jobs that women and men do, the sorts of policies and strategies employers have in place to address people that have caring responsibilities, to look at the composition of boards and governing bodies. All of those things that we measure now as a nation have helped drive the gender pay gap down. Action will drive the gender pay gap down. In terms of the Victoria's Gender Equality Commission, I think the work they've done is great. I do, however, have a couple of concerns. The first one is that we are putting an extra burden on employers to report again. And so we need to, wherever we can, pool resources, avoid duplication, so that we are not adding to the burden, the regulatory burden of organisations. And I would have to say that the appointment of Nikki Vincent, Dr. Nikki Vincent, as the Commissioner in Victoria was an inspired one. She is an amazing woman, and if you ever get the chance, and may I suggest that at some stage reaching out to her and getting her to present to you, she is exceptional. And I've already spoken to her a couple of times since she's been at the Commission, and we are looking at how we can work together to share resources from a federal and state perspective, so that we're not duplicating. There's too much duplication across government, and this is silly. So we need to see how we can all work together. And we proved through the COVID pandemic that the state and Commonwealth can work brilliantly together when they need to. So this is another area where we hope to be able to work brilliantly together. But I think anything, and particularly the work Victoria is doing to shine a spotlight on the inequality that still exists in workplaces today, is really, really important. And you know, if every organisation, if every employer in Australia today did a gender pay gap analysis, if they found out where, and I've never come across an organisation that hasn't had a gender pay gap in favour of men, if when they do that analysis they find out where their problems are and they start to take action, we would have the gender pay gap closed in no time. It's about analysing your data, finding out where your problem is and taking action. It's not that hard.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Libby. I've got one final question for you. We will need to keep it brief because we are nearing the end of our session. How can we here in the Grampians region influence a gendered response to COVID-19 recovery?
You've got to keep talking about it. You've got to keep telling the story, and telling the story through your own story is really important. You've got to collect any data that you can and tell your story through data, but it's about talking. It's about hitting the media at a local level and state level and national level if you can. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a fantastic job. You are driving change. If everyone, you know, one person can make a change. One group like yours can make more change. Just keep at it. You're doing a great job, and under exceptionally difficult circumstances. And thank you for all you're doing. You know, as an Australian not working in the industry, thank you for what you're doing. You have seen Victoria and helped Australia get through a terribly difficult period. We owe you a lot. Keep at it. Keep talking. We will get there.
Thanks, Libby. What a great note to finish on, and what a privilege it's been to have you along today. I'd like to sincerely thank on behalf of the board, Libby Lyons, Jenny Beals and Kathy Basharia for coming along today. And I'm going to give you a virtual bunch of flowers. Aren't they beautiful? And I'm going to hand back to Amy Rhodes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess, and thank you so much for facilitating those couple of sessions so beautifully, and for handling the technical issues with such grace. We are very, very lucky. So thank you, Jess, and also thank you again to Libby, to Jenny and to Kathy. I'd like to thank everyone for your time today, for coming along to our AGM and taking time out of what I'm sure is a busy day for all of us. I also want to say a personal thank you to our Women's Health Grampian staff for helping pull together this AGM. It is always a challenge each year, but even more so this year. And on behalf of the board, I'd just like to say a huge thank you. And we particularly must thank Velma, who is our right-hand woman. And as a board, we would be lost without her. So thank you so much, Velma, for all of your hard work, but to all of the Women's Health Grampian staff involved in pulling today together. A reminder for those of you who are joining us momentarily for the special general meeting at 1:30, you'll need to use the link that you've been sent to join that meeting and to be able to access that properly. So we'll look forward to seeing those of you who are attending that then. But otherwise, we will bid you all farewell. Thank you again. Oh, yes, Libby.
May I say one thing?
Yes,
the agency's new data is being launched on the 26th. Please look out for it. We are doing it virtually, and I can send the link through to you so that people can join virtually if they would like. But the data for this last year, which will be the pre-COVID data, which will form an important benchmark for next year, is out next week. So happy to send through the link so you can register it. Any of you can register if you'd like to join us.
That would be brilliant. I can already see a lot of comments popping up in the chat there, Libby, that lots of people are very keen to see that. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. We'll look forward to seeing it. Okay.
Can I jump in, Amy?
Yes.
Can I just... sorry, so Libby, Marianne Hendren, the CEO. Sorry, we don't have the opportunity to have, you know, handshakes, hugs, cups of tea and yummy food at the end of this as we normally would, and an ongoing conversation. However, it's been such an advantage in terms of doing this remotely that we are able to bring you in from Sydney, albeit a little bit glitchy to begin with, but it all worked beautifully in the end, and we really do appreciate that. I just wanted to do two things. One is to thank Amy and Jess for your wonderful work in helping with this, and also to say that we've had such rich comments and conversation going on in the chat, and a number of questions that we just didn't have time to get to. So Libby, if it's okay, we'll follow up with you at your office if there's further things that it would be good to get clarification on, and we'll distribute that the comments and additional answers to everyone in the next couple of weeks. I'm also keen to take up your comment about Nikki Vincent. I heard her at a meeting last week and was super impressed, and what I think would be fabulous if we could get yourself and Nikki for a conversation at some stage down the track, and we might work towards that, because I think that would be another fabulous conversation. So that's all from me. Thank you, everybody, and Amy, I'll just pop back to you to do the closure.
Thanks, Marianne. Nothing further from me. I think we've covered everything. So we'll leave you all to go about your days. Thank you again for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you all over the coming 12 months and touching base with everyone before the AGM rolls around again. Thanks, everyone.